I'm Keith Ghostland.
I'm Ann Charles.
And I'm Linda Quinlan, and welcome to All Things LGBTQ. It's January 2nd, and
12th.
How about the 12th?
Oh, it's January 12th. And we're recording today in Montpelier, which is unceded indigenous land.
So I am indeed Keith Ghostland, and it is still the 12th. So the first thing I want to do is highlight a couple of events. And one is, as you've been hearing us say on and on, the town hall forums that will be virtual events. And actually, if you go on to the All Things LGBTQ Facebook, you can find a link, or you can find the site where you can register for all of the town hall forums and a bit about the forums. So the other is we want to acknowledge that the Pride Theater at the Chandler in Randolph is doing a production of Raggedy Ann. And this will be on February 6th at 7:30. This is also a Zoom event. You can go on to the Chandler site. It is a $12 donation. It is live on the 6th with a follow-up talkback, which they will still be doing. Exactly. We've been part of them. And then it's also going to be available on demand for the following week. And this is a reproduction. They've done this before, but they thought it would be timely given the current climate, so it is happening again. And the benefits from your donation will go to GLAAD's Transgender Rights Project.
Nice.
A very worthy cause. Also, Queer Connect, who we don't talk about that much. They're in Bennington. But one of the esteemed members of this group may have participated in their Lesbian Story Hour,
Yes.
sharing their poetry. And it happens every Thursday, 7 p.m. You can go to their site and you can get the link. This is intended to be women sharing their work for a women-identified audience. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. Also, they have a monthly healing circle that is coordinated with the full moon. So if this is something of interest, they're a source. And they're already starting their Pride 2021 organizing. And last year, due to COVID, they did a caravan. Rather than trying to make a virtual event, they all got in their individual cars, put up signs, drove through downtown. So I'm going to talk a few headlines. The first thing I want to do is an acknowledgement of a new publication.
And not just because we're in it.
I think it's been going since 2012. I tried to.
No.
Well, it's new to us.
That's right, it's new to us.
Linda had someone who reached out saying, do you know about it? Boston Spirit. It is a free subscription, both mailed to you or online, and they really make an effort to gather information from all around New England. There's a section for each state, section for GLAAD to talk about organizing, and was alluded to, we're not merely promoting it because they're promoting us.
And it may be that the editor will come and be interviewed by us in some future date. So look forward to that.
A little push. So very quickly, I want to acknowledge the passing of David Skondras, who, and for people who don't know, David Skondras was the first openly gay member of the Boston City Council. He died of polycystic kidney disease. And the real Vermont connection is that he spoke at our 1989 Vermont Pride celebration that was on the State House lawn here in Montpelier. Along with David was Perry Jude Radicek from NGLTF, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and an appearance by Kwanzaa. So that might be this week's trivia question. I thought Kwanzaa was an African-American holiday that happened in January. Who or what was that Pride Day? And don't forget, you have to ask me, Linda, to give you the answer.
Yes.
Also want to acknowledge the opening of Waltham House in Boston. And this is a project of the Home for Little Wanderers, and this is specifically a residential home for LGBTQ plus youth. And the larger organization said they found that they were getting more and more queer youth who were coming in for services, and they acknowledged they didn't have the expertise to deal with the true issues that youth were dealing with, such as trauma and housing insecurity and discrimination. So they created the separate project. Other end of the spectrum in Boston, Fenway
I'm
Community
very
Health.
excited about that news.
LGBTQ Aging Project, they got a $10,000 grant from the Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation to help LGBTQIA elders stay connected. And what this means is they're going to be taking this $10,000, they're going to be investing it in technology for seniors. So I'm giving you classes on how to use Zoom and Skype and Facebook, and they're also purchasing tablets that they can then loan out to the elders community.
Ah,
Thank
nice.
you. New Hampshire want to recognize the election of Rebecca Perkins Qua as the first LGBTQ woman elected to their state senate, and that increases their LGBTQ caucus to 10. Remember, Vermont, we have 13.
And are you covering the story about the senior housing in Boston?
No,
No?
that's next time.
Next time, okay.
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 So also, looking at Maine, the Movement Advancement Project, they think Maine has the most LGBTQ plus inclusive laws and policies in the nation.
Huh.
I was a little taken aback until I realized that not only do they have comprehensive legislation the same as Vermont, but they don't have any provisions that allows individuals or secular businesses to ignore civil rights law based on their professed religious beliefs.
Mm.
So that may be something here in Vermont we're going to need to look at. And then Justin Chenette, 2016, he was the youngest LGBTQ lawmaker in the country, and he was one of the first elected to the Maine Senate. He's decided to step away from politics in a way, but, and this may be a future review or interview, he's written a book for children about state government. And there may be a coloring book component to this that is entitled The Great Whoopie Pie Debate, a kid's guide to the Maine legislature. And he's donating copies to his area schools with the intent that, as it expands, he will donate to one to every elementary school statewide.
Nice.
And when we come back around, I'm going to talk about the Vermont legislature and issues here in our state.
Well, I'd like to add something, if I may, to, I'd like to underscore the need for technological expertise in the aging population. Because I was just reading today that one of the problems with the COVID rollout is that if you don't have a computer and you can't operate it, you're really behind. A lot of people are being left out.
And if you don't have access to Zoom or know how to use it,
Exactly.
how do you have weekly business meetings?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or how do
So-
you have all things LGBTQ on there?
How do you
Yeah,
tune
there
in?
you go.
That's right. To YouTube.
So, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks to Kim Ward for graciously sitting in. She did a bang-up job. Very energetic and informative, and, it's good to be back. I'd like to add to Keith's announcement. You may recall I did an interview with WMN Zine in November, and they are putting out their next issue and have issued an open call for WMN Zine number 3. So it's, the call is between December 15th and February 15th. So it's an international open call for artists who identify as disabled and are living with a physical, sensory, cognitive, or chronic illness and as lesbian. So you got to identify as lesbian to submit artwork or poetry.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, we want to support these artists and writers as we feel discourse around disabilities and representation of is lacking, particularly within the art world and the lesbian community. I don't know if you can see this, but here's a picture of the editor of this issue. She's Z Monteiro, based in London, UK. She's a community organizer, blogger, poet, and activist who identifies as neurodivergent. Both in their writing, talks about their poems, they challenge the audience to reflect and engage on topics relating to blackness, queerness, female masculinity, and vulnerability. So once again, the submission requirements are that you identify as lesbian and that you identify as disabled and or are living with a physical, sensory, chronic, or cognitive illness. So go to the WMN Zine
And
website.
I can also put it on our site if you want.
I
And then
asked you-
people can go there and,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tune into the All Things LGBTQ Facebook
Facebook.
page for more information about that. Now, international news. I'd like to spend some time talking about the top 9 LGBTQ stories from Latin America and the Caribbean. There were 10, but I took out the Pope because I think we've heard enough about him.
We know how you feel about him.
Another story I'd like to explore, and I have a clip to help, it concerns Russell T Davies, who has written an article in The Guardian called "I Looked Away for Years, Finally I've Put AIDS in the Center of a Drama." And I didn't know who he was until I read this article. He started Queer as Folk, and he's a real mover. I think he's 57, and he's done a lot of stuff, but I want to tell you a little more about It's a Sin, his latest project. Now, stories I'm probably not going to get to at length, but I have a lot of pictures for. The first Greek openly gay minister has been named. His name is Nicholas Yatromaloukas. He's 44, and his picture is before you now. Then sad news from Colombia, a prominent transgender activist dies. Her name was Laura Weinstein, and she was very active in transgender rights in Colombia, particularly dealing with immigrants from other Latin American countries who were transgender, who came to Colombia. And she died of, she didn't die of COVID, but she had trouble breathing and then died. So on a better note, I'd like to just tell you that China has a permissive gay capital. It's called Gaydu, but really it's called Chengdu, and it refuses to fold. The Beijing government has been pressuring it and closing the bars, and of course COVID has accelerated a lot of the crackdown there. But they're vowing to go forward in Chengdu. So they're far enough from Beijing so that they're kind of out of the radar on that score, gaydar maybe. Other news, and I have a picture of a gay pride march in Japan now. That's a recent one in September of this year. One outcome of the climate there is that 948 people have changed their gender in 2019 in Japan. This is a record pace, and it's really hard to do it. I mean, the requirements are really draconian, but people are changing. You know, it's increased over the years. So that's newsworthy. And finally, I have a picture of sprinter Corinne Humphreys. She wants to empower LGBTQ youth as she eyes the Tokyo Olympics. So she came out, she was bullied, she was harassed as a butch person, And she incurred an injury and had a setback. We all had a setback from the pandemic, but she's feeling encouraged and is going to go forward in the Tokyo Olympics, she hopes. So those are my headlines.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I have a few, and Georgia Senate race that two Democrats won. We'll talk a little bit about that. Betsy DeVos resigns, but not before she trashes the transgender community.
Yet again.
Trump Jr. incites the mob at the Capitol with anti-trans rant. Pro-cyclist Justin Levens comes out. After the coup attempt in D.C., LGBTQ politicians and organizations call for Trump's removal. Bay Area Archives founder Len Keller dies at 69. Latinx trans woman Alexandria Winchester is killed in the Bronx. She was 24 years old and a client of Ali Fernie Center, which serves homeless LGBTQ young people. And though this is not in America, I am covering it anyway. But anyway, it's Pierre Cardin.
Ah,
The French fashion designer dies at 69. I'm at 89,
I
sorry.
thought 69.
89.
Yeah.
Yeah. He brought geometric shapes.
He held
to-
up well.
He did. I know, I was reading.
Yeah.
All right.
So Pierre did what?
He brought geometric shapes to the, is it hoot culture? Or
Haute
Haute culture.
haute couture.
Haute
And puts his
couture.
name on everything from clothing to perfume to pens. So, a new proposal in the House of Representatives could eliminate gender language from its rules,
Yep.
and that might have already passed.
I
I'm
think
not
it did.
sure.
I think that's
Yeah.
a done deal.
And Kim Sherman, who wrote about women and weight and identity, dies at 80. We'll have more about her. Lois Sassoon, partner of Leslie Gore, passed away from complications of COVID. She was 80 years old. She was an artist, designer, film producer, and activist. She and Leslie Gore were together for 40 years. A gay Trump supporter crowdfunded his trip to D.C. and is now bragging about storming the Capitol. Mark Hott, a hoot, and creator of LGBT Trump social pages. Hoot is from Rochester, New York, so if you're in Rochester and you happen to know who he is,
Shun him.
give him a shout out.
800 call FBI.
Yeah, really. New Cadbury commercial features a gay couple sharing a cream egg. An anti-LGBTQ group still praying that God will give Donald Trump a miraculous victory. We'll have more about that. So those are my headlines, and I'll get back to the stories when we come around again.
All right.
Keith.
So our Vermont legislature, on the same day that we were watching Becca Balint become the first openly lesbian president pro tem here in Vermont, is when the insurrection was happening in Washington, D.C. And what happened here in Vermont is almost immediately the governor issued a statement saying the president needed to be removed from office immediately. And our legislature, in one of their first acts in the House, they wrote a joint resolution, and it was co-authored by 4 members, one representing each political party. There was a progressive, there was a Democrat, there was a Republican, there was an independent, excuse me. And the progressive might have been Brian Chena, who is a member of our LGBTQ out legislative group. And their proposal had 122 co-sponsors. which is significant since there are only 150 members of the House. And the joint resolution passed the House by 130 yes, 16 no, and then there would be 3 abstaining or absent. Now, with a little detective work, we can figure out who the 16 people were, but what was put out by the clerk of the House is that the software that they are currently using to register votes, that this would be the same as a voice vote. So it would only capture that it was a yes, a no, or an abstaining, that unless a member specifically asked for a roll call, your vote was not associated with your name. And that's what happened here. Okay, but if you're really interested, I think we can kind of figure it out by who wasn't a co-sponsor. And so it then should have been passed on to the Senate, and it should have been held, you know, it's on the notice calendar, and then it's brought up for a vote, there's debate. The Senate was not going to have any of that, and there was a motion to immediately suspend the rules, to bring it up for immediate action and vote. And in the Senate, it passed 29-1. But what's significant about the Senate portion of this is that the person who made the motion to suspend the rules and to vote on the bill was made by Senator Randy Brock, who is the Republican leader in the Senate and is known to be a conservative politician.
Right.
It kind of took you a bit by surprise. But because of, you know, the statement from our governor and this impeachment resolution, you know, that, you know, called out the insurrection for what it was, asked for the immediate removal of the president, the social media chatter has increased, so that the calls for armed demonstrations at the State House has increased dramatically, so that there was an alert that was put out saying you might want to avoid that section of downtown for a while, which may not be such a bad idea. Our legislature, however, continued on with their work. They're doing the people's business, regardless of the threats. And one of the things that happened, committee assignments happened. All of the positions of leadership, with the exception of the Republican leader in the Senate, are all women. All of the money committees are run by women. And our representative from Montpelier, Mary Hooper, is now the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And looking at Ways and Means, which is the other money committee in the House, their new vice chair might be Emily Kornheiser, who is also one of the members of Vermont's LGBTQ caucus, is what I'm going to call them. The other thing that happened, and both the House and the Senate made all of the appropriate motions and adopted all of the appropriate rules so that our legislature can function in a virtual reality, which legislatures and other states haven't been quite so good at. So what that also means is that heightened security, that heightened alert, doesn't have as much impact here because we don't actually have people in the State House right now. Okay. One of the other committee assignments of note is in the Senate side. It's the Education Committee, where Senator Baruth of Chittenden has said, you know what, he was willing to step down, let someone else take a position of leadership, and that someone might be Brian Campion, who is also an LGBTQ plus caucus member. So there's a growing voice there. And having an out gay man on the Education Committee when we're still looking at social and racial equity in schools could be very important. The other pieces that they're looking at is in the conversations relative to the budget. Coach Christie, who has been a person of color, longstanding member within the legislature, highly respected, is saying we need to increase the appropriations that goes to the racial equity director, T Davies, because she has more than met the initial expectations, and she is showing up at places being asked to sit on committees beyond what they had allowed for. So one of the hopes is that they will actually add 2 analyst positions to work with her, as well as an increased budget. And following on to that, the governor has asked all departments within the state of Vermont to create a racial equity liaison officer within their departments. And here's the piece where it's more than just simple rhetoric. The directive is it has to be a leadership position. So I can't have my racial equity officer, oh, they're somewhere down the hall there. No, they're part of your leadership team and they're informing the decisions your department is making. The other things that we're going to be watching for is Brian China's has talked about crafting a bill, creating a foundation to provide funding for BIPOC community members to purchase land and houses. You know, what I had reported on a previous show is like, you know, the BIPOC community was 18% of the Burlington community, only they accounted for approximately 4% of homeowners. That's quite a difference. You know, that's sort of the reverse of what we were looking at with the traffic stop data, where they're a smaller part of the population, but a larger part of the stops. So what he's looking at doing is a public, from the public accounts, a bill hasn't been introduced yet, it would be a public-private partnership, bringing monies together to create a foundation that would have a BIPOC board of directors overseeing how the fund gets used and ensuring that its intended use was its actual use. He was also proposing asking each township in the state of Vermont to set aside at least one parcel of land to be purchased by a member of the BIPOC community. That's going to be a much more aggressive agenda. The other thing we're looking at is, you know, we're looking at the impact of COVID on Vermont. We're seeing our numbers increase. We are still not collecting any data about the impact on the LGBTQ plus communities in Vermont. And we know, particularly with the transgender community, we do not have the same access to health care, so that we are most likely being disproportionately impacted, but there's no recognition of that or specialized services to outreach to our department. And the other thing that's happening is the liaison team of the LGBTQI Alliance is reaching out to the lieutenant governor saying, so, welcome. Don't you think it's time we had coffee?
Yeah.
Good. Well, apropos of BIPOC, hasn't the Burlington City Council passed a measure to help BIPOC businesses?
Yes, they're putting together a granting process to have monies available for underrepresented BIPOC business owners. Yes.
So that's a step in the right direction. I'd like to talk a little about Latin America and the Caribbean. And I have a wonderful clip that I'd like to show you. And Dorito, a corporation, Dorito in Mexico, has produced a rainbow ad. And Linda and I have been talking a lot about the role of corporations in our current cultural climate.
Yes.
And it's ambivalent, but I think they can play a role in cultural change. And so take a look at this clip. I think you'll like it.
Bueno,
Hola, Paz, soy yo.
Javier, ¿cómo estás, hijo? ¿Ya estás en camino?
Sí, ya vamos en camino. En unas horas estamos ahí.
¿Con quién estás?
Con Manuel, un amigo de la uni. Es que no tenía con quién pasar las fiestas y me pareció que era buena idea invitarlo.
Claro, hijo, no hay problema. Conduce con cuidado.
Bueno, sí, te tengo que dejar. Nos vemos al rato, pa.
Nos vemos, hijo.
esto y ya nos vamos.
Hola, soy un padre divorciado de 52 años y necesito ayuda. Creo que mi hijo y su amigo son pareja y no se animan a decirme. Llevan varios días aquí y aunque tratan de ser sutiles, no lo han logrado mucho.
Hola, ¿les tomo su orden?
Un café doble para mí.
¿Tú qué vas a pedir, amor?
¿Cómo les digo que está todo bien? Hola, hijo.
Hola, pa.
Quería hablar contigo.
Dime.
Quería decirte que te quiero.
Lo que me quieres decir es que me quieres como soy.
I really like that clip.
You'll have to check it out, Keith.
I know.
And Mexico City has done a lot of good things in 2020. They celebrated the 10th anniversary of marriage equality with a group wedding of 140 same-sex couples. Now we're doing a review of 2020 in Latin America and the Caribbean. They also Mexico City also celebrated its 5th anniversary of a gender identity law that allows individuals to change their gender designation in official documents. In July, the city became the first jurisdiction in Mexico to formally ban conversion therapies. And a comparable measure is considered for national adoption, but it's still in the works. It's been delayed because of the pandemic. So Mexico City is doing well, and shout out to Dorito Rainbow, Mexico. Barbados is a little less rosy. Governor Sandra Mason said that the government would move forward with civil unions, while also saying that same-sex marriage would be put to a public vote. So Barbados still has laws on the books banning same-sex sexual activity. A large majority of the electorate in this 286,000 inhabited island nation are very conservative, which could mean that the referendum will go down. But
So there's less people there than the state of Vermont.
286,000 people in Barbados.
460,000, right?
Well, there we go. It's a lot more conservative than the state of Vermont, I would say. But anyway, that she inaugurated civil unions is a good thing. You know, Keith mentioned the idea of learning and Brian Campion occupying that key position in Brazil. 2 separate rulings in April and May by the Brazilian Supreme Court struck down laws in 2 states that banned the use of public schools of education material containing material on gender ideology. So these, you know, there was a ban on talking about gender or women or LGBT concerns, and that was struck down by the Supreme Court in Brazil. It's a gender ideology, as you know, is a term used by conservatives to label any type of idea, theory, or research about non-heteronormative sexuality, gender identity, and even feminism.
So their Supreme Court must be more liberal than Bolsonaro.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, because they seem to this isn't the first one we've heard that they've kind of, the Supreme Court has.
I know it. And let me skip the backward move in Chile for a minute and go directly to Rio, which has seen really exciting stuff. Monica Benicio, who is the widow of Rio's councilwoman Mariela Franco, who was assassinated in that tragic act in 2018. The widow has been elected to the city council during Brazil's midterm election. She celebrated in this tweet, "The city council will have an opportunity to have an openly lesbian councilwoman. I am very grateful to the more than 22,000 people who voted for a future feminist and anti-fascist mandate for the Rio City Council." A native of Rio, Cariocas is a new word I learned. It means native of Rio. So the Cariocas, also not the, it's with the C, not karaoke.
Yeah, I was going to say, I went to the bad place.
They also voted out of office their mayor, Marcello Crivella, who was an anti-gay, anti-carnival, neo-Pentecostal bishop, a strong ally of homophobic President Jair Bolsonaro.
There you go.
He lost in every one of the city's 49 constituencies in a runoff. So Brazil, exciting things happening in Brazil. Now, we've had some backward movement in Chile. In a 5-4 vote, Chile's constitutional court denied a request by a lesbian couple married in Spain to have their marriage recognized in Chile. The couple involves a Chilean and a Spanish national. Aware that Chile's court remains one of the most conservative in South America, LGBTQ advocates are now pinning their hopes for greater equality and redefinition of marriage on a constituent assembly scheduled to convene next year. So good luck to them. Gender-based curfews have been, remember, several months ago I mentioned with the onset of COVID, several countries initiated gender-based curfews, which did a terrible disservice to the transgender community. Obviously, trans people are disproportionately affected by these laws. They mandated that men and women go out on alternating days. It led to security guards and police targeting trans people. Trans activists were vocal in denouncing these lockdown measures and helped reverse them in Peru and Colombia. So the only country that still has them now is Panama. Progress. In Bolivia, in a year of tremendous electoral tumult, Bolivia's Constitutional Court issued one of the most remarkable pro-LGBT rulings in the country's history. They ordered the annulment of an administrative resolution that denied marriage rights to a gay couple. The Bolivian court said this measure violated the Constitution's principle of equality and non-discrimination. This decision is important because the Constitution recognizes marriage as only between a woman and a man. But for many analysts, this decision paves the way for same-sex marriage. And one more bit of good news from Latin America involves Costa Rica. It became the first Central American and 7th Latin American country to legalize same-sex marriage. In the 2010s, the Costa Rican government tried to advance marriage rights only to face significant opposition from religious groups and parts of the electorate. So they appealed, the activists have been struggling about this, and they appealed to the International Court of Human Rights, which in 28, in a landmark decision, ruled that all signatories, which includes to a human rights treaty, that of course includes Costa Rica, were required to provide full rights. End of discussion. They gave Costa Rica 18 months to comply, and despite resistance, including a presidential candidate in 2018 who wanted to dismiss the ruling and have congressional leaders delay action because of the pandemic, same-sex marriage became officially legal this year in 2020, despite the pandemic. So, good
Do you
news.
have another clip?
Pardon me?
Did you have another clip?
I do. Can I have am I going to have another segment?
I don't know. I don't think so. Look.
Oh, well, let me just rush through to Russell Davies. He wrote a very moving article in The Guardian in which he talked about AIDS and how he brought us back to that period where that period of shame where people didn't go to funerals and went through, one thing he said, history is written by the activists, and then he mentioned Larry Kramer. I don't know if that's true, but when he started Queer as Folk in 1999, he was opposed by LGBTQ activists because there was no mention of AIDS. And he said that was a deliberate decision because he didn't want LGBT people to be defined by an illness. But now he's come around full tilt, and he clarifies the stigma still exists, but he has, he's starting a TV show on Channel 4, which will appear in late January, called It's a Sin.
In London?
In England, and I imagine, it's on HBO Max here in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's called It's a Sin, and it traces the whole period that I remember well. With it's a gay disease. What is this? Gay denial. And there's a longer clip I'm not showing that shows the main character ridiculing when people first learned what was going on and couldn't figure out. Anyway, now I have a clip from the show, and it's a minute long.
And you'll probably be able to rent it. If you don't have HBO, you can pay for it probably, I'm sure.
It'll circulate,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It looks really good.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
I'll be stinking rich.
I want to learn everything. I just want to be happy.
Here we are, the Pink Palace.
I'm going to be an actor.
Stupid little dreamer. If you leave now, you don't come back.
Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Naughty boy.
Have you seen this?
There are boys dying all over the world, but no one knows anything.
Do you seriously think there's an illness that only kills gay men? I don't believe it! Now hit me with those lasers, please!
He went into hospital, ambulance.
Shame on you!
He loved your son. What's wrong with that?
Do you think I should have known?
I've got some news for you.
Now let's march!
I'm gonna live.
Brand new drama from Russell T Davies, It's a Sin, coming soon to All 4 and Channel 4.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Remember, Queer as Folk started out on Channel 4 in the UK.
Right.
So,
And it went through a whole, I looked them up on Wikipedia. Very accomplished.
Yeah. Well, let's just let's get back to the U.S. for a minute. And
Must we?
I know. Georgia Senate race, the two Democrats won, holds reaching implications for the LGBTQ community. Not only does this, do we get to run the Senate, but it will hold up future discrimination attempts and will protect LGBTQ people. Both Senators-elect Ossoff and Raphael Warnock said that they both were committed to supporting the Equality Act. The federal bill would also update civil rights legislation and protect discrimination based on sexual orientation.
It would put into federal law a codification of the Bostick decision that we are protected.
Yep. So that's good news.
Yep.
In one of her final acts as Secretary of Education before announcing her resignation, Betsy DeVos decided to ensure that transgender students could still be targeted for discrimination in American educational system. In the interim memo sent by the Department of Education, DeVos staff once again laid out their policy of refusing to protect gender identity, despite the ruling of the Supreme Court in Bostock versus Clayton County, made in June 2020.
That can be reversed, though, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, but there's going to be so much to do.
Well,
I mean, everything has been gutted. I mean, it's just going to be really, really hard.
Gotta be done.
Yep,
The
gotta be
first
done.
order of business is a comprehensive assessment of the carnage that was left behind.
Right. And to get people into all of these departments and everything. And I mean, I'm sure the morale is just like in the pits. Well, anyway, and more of Trump Jr. incited the mob at the Capitol with an anti-trans rant. Jr. lambasted trans athletes, saying that Democrats spent all this money to come to the conclusion that trans women playing female sports have a competitive edge. Fox News cut away from his speech just after that remark. However, Democrats did not fund this study, and the findings in this study were much more complex and nuanced than Trump Jr.'s characterization. The cyclist Justin Levens, a cyclist in the U23 division, comes out. This is one of the best cyclists in the country. He's 19 years old. In an interview, he said that he's been thinking about coming out for the last 2 years.
Welcome.
That's good.
And after a coup attempt in D.C., LGBTQ politicians and organization calls for Trump's removal. Representative David, I think it's Shillan of Rhode Island, and Representative Ted Lieu and Jamie Ruskin introduced articles of impeachment. Representative Mondaire Jones, who is one of the first out black men elected to Congress, also signed the articles in support of Trump's removal.
It's David Cicilline.
Yes.
He is a Democrat.
Cicilline?
Cicilline.
Cicilline.
And the reason I know it, he Democrat from Rhode Island. He was the first openly gay congressman elected from the state of Rhode Island, and he's the chief architect of the articles of impeachment.
And I should know how to pronounce Italian names, but anyway, pioneering
You'll learn.
Pioneering Texas transgender politician. Let's see. Pioneering Texas transgender politician Addison Perry Frank dies at age 39. Frank ran for the House of Representatives last year and for mayor in our hometown of Snyder, Texas. She won neither, but the cause of her death is unknown at this time. And a proposal is in the House of Representatives which could eliminate gendered language, and I think we already decided that passed.
Right.
Now for Keith, a message from Tom of Finland. Foundation.
Hi.
On Sunday, December 13, 2020, Tom of Finland Foundation proudly presented awards to stellar individuals who have demonstrated their vast commitment to our community. These awards were given on the final day of the 25th Art and Culture Festival. Plugged in which marked both the 36th year of the foundation as well as the 100th birthday of Tom of Finland. TOF is honored to have the opportunity to recognize these influential individuals who have and continue to shape the world in which we live. The 2020 Artist Hall of Fame Award went to artist, writer, filmmaker, photographer, and underground director Bruce LaBruce for his artistic achievements and steadfast commitment to art and culture of erotic art in the community. His 2020 Lifetime Award went to certified sexologist, author, artist, and influential figure Annie Sprinkle for leadership and steadfast commitment to the erotic art community. For a complete listing, you have to go to the Tom of Finland Foundation. There are a bunch of awards. I just named two. And you can see they have a certain bin. Oh, and also there's an exhibition, and it's called Not a Second Too Soon is a new cultural awareness campaign that shares the stories of 12 LGBTQ seniors, which includes a politician, veteran, Stonewall survivor, and Black Panther, who collectively lost 485 years living in the closet. Oh. So,
where is this?
This
exhibition?
is
it at the
Sage. It's being created by Sage and Watermark Retirement Communities. And it gives a candid glimpse into the struggles of 12 LGBTQ seniors, men and women whose stories are told through a series of interactive portraits. Ooh. So, and it is, it says it's being created by Sage and Watermark Retirement Communities. So I think it is a community, a specific community.
It might be interactive online.
Interactive on well, 12 people are.
But you might be able to.
Yeah, you might be able to. So I will put something on
our
Facebook page. But, you know, it has to, and Sage is putting this on, I'm not sure. Is there a national Sage?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's probably who's doing it.
Okay.
So.
Well, let's hope it's interactive and we can see it.
Yes, that sounds really good. Yeah.
We'll have to report back in a week.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, our trivia question.
Yes.
Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
African American holiday? Pride Day in June? Kwanzaa might also be Kwanzaa, a originally lesbian and then expanded women's percussion group founded by Gwen Servington of Burlington, who they performed around the state and at the marches on Washington.
Ah.
So,
very good.
And they have disbanded now, but they were phenomenal. They could work up a crowd like nobody else. So with that,
is that it then?
Oh, we have nothing more to say?
Oh, we have a lot more to say, but we've kind of run out of time, and Zach wants to have supper.
To be continued.
So remember, now it is even more important to resist.